This week on the agenda, as China and the EU celebrate 50 years of diplomatic ties, we ask where are there opportunities for further cooperation in an increasingly divided world? On May the 6th, China and the European Union mark the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties. Well, just where do relations between two of the world's largest economies stand in 2025? And are they moving closer together or further apart? I sat down with Ambassador Cai Run, head of the Chinese mission to the EU. So, Ambassador, great to have you. So, over the past 50 years of bilateral relations, we have seen some ups and downs between China and the European Union. So, how do you assess the current bilateral relations?
This year marks the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the EU, an important year in the development of China-EU relations. Over the past 50 years, this relationship has traveled an extraordinary journey and maintained a steady growth momentum.
1975年呢，这个中国同欧盟当时是欧盟的
In 1975, China established diplomatic relations with the European Community, the predecessor of the European Union. In 2001, the two sides announced the establishment of a comprehensive partnership. In 2004, the partnership was upgraded to a comprehensive strategic partnership. In 2014, President Xi Jinping paid a historical visit to the EU, elevating China-EU relations to a new height.
新年伊始，习近平主席同欧洲理事会主席科斯塔通了电话。
Early this year, President Xi Jinping had a phone conversation with President António Costa of the European Council. They had in-depth discussions and reached important consensus on future China-EU ties, providing strategic guidance and charting the course for the relationship. The two sides have the China-EU summit mechanism at the leaders level, with 24 meetings held so far. We also have established 5 high-level dialogues in strategic, economic, and trade, digital, environmental, and climate, and people-to-people fields, along with over 70 consultations and dialogue mechanisms.
这也是中欧务实合作
The past 50 years has witnessed more practical cooperation. When China and the EU established the diplomatic ties, their trade volume was only $2.4 billion, and bilateral investment was nearly zero. As of 2024, according to Chinese statistics, the trade volume has reached $784.8 billion, and the two-way investment in stock has hit $260 billion. The China-EU Railway Express has made over 100,000 trips, connecting more than 220 cities and 25 European countries.
220多个城市，这也是中欧。
The past 50 years has witnessed the deepening of friendship between the Chinese and European people. As China continues to grow, more and more Chinese citizens have come to Europe to experience its beautiful landscapes and rich cultures. Meanwhile, the fascination with China and the Chinese cultures continue to grow and captivate audiences over time.
也是长盛不衰。那么还有一条重要经验。
An important takeaway from the China-EU relationship is the commitment to the positioning of partners. China and the EU sit at opposite ends of the Eurasian continent, with no fundamental clash of interests or geopolitical conflicts. Our consensus and cooperation far outweigh differences and competition. We are partners, not rivals, and certainly not enemies.
那么还有一项重要的经验就是中欧双方。
Another important takeaway is the joint commitment to multilateralism. Multilateralism is the greatest unifying consensus between China and the EU. Both sides stand for upholding the international system centered on the UN and the multilateral trading system underpinned by international law. Both are committed to building a multipolar world and promoting economic globalization.
和经济全球化。
So you have talked about deeper political engagement, trade ties and people-to-people exchanges. I think one of the most impressive achievements is the trade ties between the two sides. From $2.4 billion to about $785 billion in the space of 50 years, trade has always been the cornerstone of bilateral relations, but tensions persist, especially concerning Chinese-made EVs, trade imbalances and market access. So what do you think should be done to resolve tensions?
经贸合作是中欧关系的重要组成部分。
Economic and trade cooperation is crucial to China-EU relations. It acts as a stabilizer and accelerator in this relationship. At its core, this cooperation is mutually beneficial and complementary, delivering real benefits to the two peoples and contributing to global economic growth and prosperity.
中欧经贸合作规模大，涉及领域广泛。
Our cooperation is vast in scale and broad in scope. It's inevitable that differences and frictions may arise.
分歧甚至摩擦也是难免的。中方反对将经贸问题政治化。
China opposes politicizing economic and trade issues and overstretching the concept of security and rejects protectionism. China hopes to work with the EU to earnestly deliver on the consensus reached by our leaders to resolve differences through dialogue and consultation. This is in both sides' interests and in the interest of the world.
这对双方有利，对世界也有利。我在同很多的中方朋友、欧方朋友交流。
In conversations with my Chinese and European friends, I often heard one view that makes perfect sense to me: to turn the points of friction and differences between China and EU into points of cooperation and growth in our relationship.
中欧在广泛领域都有广阔的这个合作。
There's vast potential across many sectors. Even in the large-scale and well-developed field of economic and trade cooperation, there's still huge potential for further growth. There's promising potential in clean energy technology, new energy, and combating climate change.
将来还有一个很重要的合作领域。
Another key area of cooperation in the future is artificial intelligence. We also share common interests and needs in upholding multilateralism, preserving the WTO-centered multilateral trading system, and opposing unilateralism and protectionism.
主义这些方面也同样具有共同利益。
And you talked about turning differences into the common ground where the two sides can work together. Specifically, you mentioned green transition and artificial intelligence. But when it comes down to each individual Chinese enterprise operating in the EU, it's actually easier said than done. So what are some of their concerns?
这个我来驻欧盟使团工作已经有一段时间了。在这个期间呢
I've worked at the Chinese mission to the EU for some time and have had extensive interactions with both Chinese and European businesses.
那么从同中国企业这个交流的情况来看呢，欧盟
In general, Chinese enterprises highly value the EU market, which is the largest bloc of developed countries and one of the most advanced regions globally. According to available data, China's direct investment stock in Europe exceeds $120 billion, accounting for 33% of its investment in developed economies.
对发达经济体投资总量的这个33%。那么从总体上看呢，中国企业对
Overall, Chinese enterprises are eager to deepen cooperation and remain optimistic about its prospects.
与此同时呢，在欧中资企业也有他们的多方面的关切。
However, they also have concerns, mainly in two areas. First, they hope the EU can provide a fair, just, and non-discriminatory business environment, free from political interference. Second, they seek greater certainty, both in terms of policies and regulatory predictability.
同时，我们也会积极地推动企业这个
At the same time, we will also encourage compliance and sustainable practices. In short, we remain committed to assisting and supporting Chinese enterprises in Europe.
那么这也是我们的职责所在。
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called for constructive engagement with China, and in a phone call with China's Premier Li Qiang in early April, she also called on China and the EU to provide stability and predictability to global economy. And you also said, I'm quoting you, that the EU and China are partners, not rivals or opponents. So in light of the current geopolitical tensions, what do you think a true partnership is like?
这个当今世界正处于 百年变局之中。
The world is undergoing profound changes unseen in a century. In a world full of changes and turbulence, China-EU relations carry more strategic significance and global impact.
一是进一步加强高层往来。今
First,
年
it
是
is
中欧
important
建
to
交
further strengthen
50 周
high-level
年，
exchanges.
是双方
The
加强
50th
高层往来
anniversary
的
of
这个契
diplomatic
机。
ties
那么
presents an
一系列
opportunity
的
to
高层往
enhance
来
such high-level
将进一步
exchanges.
促
A
进双
series
方
of
的
high-level
战略沟
interactions
通，
will
增
deepen
进
strategic
战略互信。
communication,
二
build
是
on mutual
进
trust,
一步
and
加强
drive the
务实合
relationship
作。
forward.
经过50多年的这个交流合作，这个特别是包括经贸方面。
Second, it is important to deepen practical cooperation. After over 50 years of exchanges and cooperation, including in economy and trade, China and EU have formed an economic relationship that is closely intertwined and highly symbiotic.
高质量发展。
China is now advancing high-quality development and Chinese modernization, while the EU is striving to enhance competitiveness. These efforts create fresh opportunities for collaboration. China has granted unilateral visa-free access to 24 EU members to facilitate people-to-people exchanges.
目的呢，也是便利人员往来。那么三是进一步加强双方。
Third, it is important to enhance coordination on major international and regional issues. China and EU are both important polar in building multipolar world and share important responsibilities in maintaining global peace and development.
有关热点问题的政治
China is also ready to strengthen communication with the EU on international hotspot issues to promote political settlement process and safeguard regional and world peace and stability.
一个里程碑，也是中欧关系发展的新起点。
The view from China there shared by Ambassador Cai Run. Despite rising global tensions, one country doubling down on trade, cultural and educational ties with China is Slovakia. From billion-dollar EV battery investments to opposing EU tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles, I spoke to Slovak Foreign Minister Juraj Blanár.
Slovakia can be so-called of a gateway for the Chinese to European Union. We have some experience already from other countries which started to do the business in the European Union, especially in Slovakia. And last visit of our Prime Minister with many ministers to China was remarkable from many reasons. We want to strengthen our cooperation, not only on trade, but also the cultural, educational level, and also people to people, which is very important. So this year we will host the first ever intergovernmental coordination committee, for example, and we will also set up the working group for investment and economic cooperation between Slovakia and China. And also we would like to easing the issuing the visa for a special Chinese group doing the business or investment in Slovakia.
So we're expecting closer trade and economic cooperation
Definitely.
between the two countries.
Definitely.
Have you ever faced any pressure from your EU partners, given that you have been deepening economic engagement with China? And do you think it's very much of a balancing act for you?
From the political point of view, of course, there are some discrepancies because some countries are very, let's say, in a different position as we are. But from the trade point of view, I think there is a very mutual understanding that the China is a very strategic partner for Slovakia and also European Union. And of course, the problem is that the EU-China deficit is more than 300 billion. So what we want to do is just rebalance this deficit and to find a mutual and fair cooperation. There is another very important sign, I mean the positive sign, that the foreign direct investment from China to European Union is something like 180 billion of euro. But vice versa, also the foreign direct investment from the EU countries to China, in China, it's also 180 billion of euro. That means both sides understand that we are very important strategic partner.
So you mean both parties are aware of the context when
Definitely.
it comes to foreign direct investment? But let's talk about China and Slovakia's bilateral investment. They do have common ground in green transition.
Right.
One of the examples is Goshen High-Tech's investment in the country is worth about $1.3 billion US. It's one of the largest investments the country has earned in history. So how do you see this collaboration benefiting Slovakia and China?
Slovakia is the leading country in producing passenger car per capita in the world. Now we have to transform to also EVs. And one very important part of this production is the batteries. And China is most developed with the technology of producing the batteries, and Goshen is one of them.
And Slovakia was one of the 5 countries that voted against levying additional tariffs on Chinese-made EVs. Let's say if tensions escalate, what consequences do you foresee?
So this can harm very much our industry, but I'm still optimistic that we can manage. But we have many challenges on the Atlantic side as well with the US, as I explained. So this is something which is very important for future cooperation. We are living in a tough time.
We are living in a tough time. We have 2
Right.
wars at this point. Also, Donald Trump's return to the White House is reshaping global geopolitics. So where does Slovakia position itself?
Our position is very clear. We would like to have a very good and open relation with every stakeholder when it comes to the political relation and also trade relation. US is an important strategic partner for Slovakia as well. Our trade turnover is 5 billion euro, and 75% of this export from Slovakia is coming from the automotive, as we already mentioned. So we would like to be in touch, in closer dialogue with the US and negotiate our interest bilaterally and also multilaterally from the European Union level.
Welcome back to this special edition of The Agenda as we mark 50 years of diplomatic relations between China and the EU. Amid shifting geopolitical currents and growing trade uncertainties, Portugal is navigating a careful path between Brussels' de-risking strategy and its own national interests. Portugal's Minister of the Presidency, António Leitão Amaro, told me why Portugal would like to be a bridge builder in a world of rising trade tensions.
I would say the bilateral relationship is pretty good. The foreign investment and trade are growing. Then on social and cultural level, the rise in tourism, I would say now Chinese people know Portugal better than ever. At political level, we are 2 different countries with their own governments with different views on many aspects, but high-level interactions have been happening both at economic, social, and political level. The relationship is now a good one.
As the 2, China and the EU, mark the 50th anniversary of their diplomatic ties, what role do you think Portugal plays in shaping China-EU relations?
I would say very, very important. Not only because Portugal is a country in Europe where there is a very important economic presence now and interaction with China. We have been showing for, I would say, centuries, a very significant role as a builder of bridges. I would say in a moment of tension, this capacity of Portugal to build bridges and to have bridges already built with China will be very important to bring together 2 of the largest economic, political blocs in the world nowadays.
And let's talk about bilateral investments. We know China is a growing economic partner of Portugal, and the country's direct investment in Portugal reached an historic high last year. It was about $4.3 billion US dollars, making Portugal one of the largest recipients of Chinese investment, especially in Western Europe. What do you think led to the growth, and in what sectors specifically?
Indeed. This wave of foreign investment of China in Portugal started about 12 years ago. I was also in government at that time. And it was a combination of domestic factors. Portugal was going through an economic and financial crisis. So different sectors were changing hands and put up, in many cases, into public tenders and public competition to attract the foreign investment. And Chinese companies came at that time. So that's a combination of that. And on the other hand, the fact that Portugal has several strategic sectors that are very interesting for countries that are looking for building green transition, digital transition, and so those sectors where it started were mostly energy related, financial services, insurance sector. It started from there, but then it has been growing and expanding to other sectors: construction, transportation, both bus, electric vehicles, now batteries-related investments.
And during Portuguese Foreign Minister Hang Zhou's visit to Beijing in March, both parties highlighted some of the areas where both countries can probably have deeper cooperation, including trade, economy, and green transition that you talked a lot just now. So what specific opportunities exist for both countries in green technologies, and how is your government facilitating green transition?
So one message important is that Portugal is, in the world, one of the countries that produces more electricity out of renewable sources. We started that green revolution about 2 decades ago. So we are very strong on solar, we are very strong on wind. I would like also to bring attention to our access to the sea, to the Atlantic Ocean. We have one very large maritime port in Sines. It's not the only one, through which can pass and go to Europe. This conjunction of well-educated people, renewable resources that we have at home, plus geographic location are a combination that is very interesting to invest in.
So both countries are quite strong in green transition. CALB, that is an EV battery maker from China, invested about $2.2 billion US dollars in a new EV battery factory in Portugal in February. It is set to launch in 2028. And Portugal has secured many Chinese investments, and it's still in the China proposed Belt and Road Initiative. Do you face increasing criticism from your EU partners, given that the EU is adopting this de-risking approach towards China?
Well, I would say that's of course a delicate issue. When we know where we are in Europe. We cherish the European values of freedom, democracy, respect for human rights. We have a very strong Atlantic relationship with the United States, but we also have very important historic and present economic, political, and social relations with China, with African countries, with Brazil. We don't want to be closer to one against the other.
So that's the reason why Portugal abstained from voting on additional tariffs on Chinese-made EVs.
So we benefit from open trade. We benefit as world a lot from globalization. We know that we have groups of people within our societies that suffered in those economic sectors that were left behind, that lost jobs and lost economic opportunities against foreign competitors. We know that. Of course, there are moments where tensions escalate so much, and then we have to team up with our closest allies. Still, we think this is a moment where we can still save the world from unstoppable drive of global tension and both economic and military tensions.
Yeah, as you said, we're witnessing more tensions now. Donald Trump has announced sweeping tariffs on many countries across the world, reciprocal tariffs in his words, including the US traditional allies like the European Union and Portugal, of course. How do you think that could impact Portugal's economy, given that the United States is still the largest single export market for your country?
So the impact in terms of the Portuguese economy is very asymmetric, because we have some areas that are very exposed to trade, to exports to the United States. But I would say that beyond that sectoral negative impact that we will have, that we will sell less to the US if the tariffs rise, we must be ready if other economic partners keep that drive to use our own defense. Again, going back, national interest should be in the top of our priorities, always.
And do you think that could potentially change Europe's de-risking approach towards China?
Well, I would say it depends on the behavior of all actors. We must understand the fears that all governments have and be able to dialogue more and to see that we have gained. See the growth in China over the past 30 years. China is a good example of that, of how global trade, global order, international law can be beneficial for everyone. With or without the trade wars, we should, and I think we as Portugal, as a pivotal player in the European scene, we will work towards increasing relationship between Europe and China. So I would say de-risking, but also de-escalate tensions. Try to reduce both.
Coming up on a future agenda, 80 years after the end of the Second World War, is it time to rethink the way the world works? But for now, from me, Jianhua, and the whole Agenda team here in London, that's goodbye.